I'm Matt Sandoval. Right now, I'm a layout artist, layout TD, and environment artist at Wedded Digital. So a lot of the time, I'm doing a lot of the cities, canyons, rocks, pushing trees around, all that fun stuff. On my free time, I definitely like to dabble on my own freelance work, as well as painting miniatures, hiking, and sailing. So I'm just trying to do a bit of both, whether that's at the computer and not at the computer.
Yeah. Presently, you're in New Zealand, right?
It's definitely it's great, and it's also really isolating at the same time. So it's good to be down here, but then at the same time, everyone I know, or at least as an American, everyone that is my family is all the way across the world. So it's definitely a bit different.
We have a lot of viewers who are still students. I think there's sort of this pressure to figure your life out while you're studying.
Oh, completely. Existential dread, it definitely comes and goes, even now. But when I was in college, I felt like I had a very intense pressure to drive myself completely into character modeling. And during that time, I really kept kind of beating my head against it. And I would always try to compare my work to, people that were very, very good and had been doing it for years. And I just felt like I never measured up. Even then, it was just one of those things where every time I would go to a conference or an event, I would constantly feel like I was just unable to get to that first step. Even as graduating and kind of moving on from there, I realized that maybe character modeling wasn't where I wanted to be. And I feel like a lot of that pressure is you fixate on something, or like you want to be an animator, or you want to be a modeler, or you kind of narrow your focus a bit. But even in like the visual effects or feature animation world, there's so many more kind of categories you can fit yourself into that isn't just an animator or a modeler or a compositor. Like there's so much you can do even just within those large subsections. So that's kind of where I found layout, which is not really something in school that they kind of promote as like an open position or like something that you'd want to do. But it definitely is something that like you can find your place and kind of just continue to explore the other opportunities that are out there that aren't just like one category or another. And then the minute I had done that, I had realized that, I might not be the best modeler, but I can really put my mind into something else. And it allowed me to kind of explore other opportunities, especially in the visual effects world and in feature.
Part of what you said that stands out to me as well is that like that feeling that maybe like you're just kind of faking it, or you don't measure up because you're talking about comparing yourself to some amazing top tier character modelers out there, and it's like I know people who have worked in the industry for like 25 years and they still feel that way, that it doesn't go away.
Yeah, it really doesn't.
So I guess like if you're a student, just make peace with that. Confidence is an illusion.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like that goes for any visual effects department or any place that I've worked at. Everybody that always seems like they have it together, it's definitely confidence holding a lot of it, that's for sure.
The university you went to, I think, didn't have exactly what you were looking for. How did you tailor that experience to learn, I think, at a faster pace and more intensely than many of the people you studied alongside?
That's a really good question, because I feel like that's something that can apply to a lot of people at a lot of universities or studying on their own. And I feel like you kind of can take the best of the situation and kind of continue to build from it. And I know for me personally, during my time, I was going to a class and I was attending classes and taking what I could learn from those. But then in a lot of my free time, it was just committing myself to watching tutorials, to watching how other artists work on their workflows. It was a lot of at-home research. I think I would probably go home and commit another 5 to 6 hours of my personal time outside of like finishing up those projects related to schoolwork on my own work. And a lot of it was mistakes and failures and kind of messing up a lot of like workflows and ruining a lot of models and all that stuff to kind of realize that it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to continue to work on your abilities and your skills. And I know for me personally, that's how I spent a lot of my college career. It wasn't really like the traditional college experience in terms of how a lot of people would associate a liberal arts degree. For me, it was just a lot of private work.
Talking to a prospective student, someone still in high school, right? What would you recommend? Would you recommend they walk the same educational path you walked, or how would you get them from where they are to in the industry?
Because I've been thinking about this a lot as well, especially prior to this interview, about the path that I took. And I feel like it's changed so much in the last 4 or 5 years from when I had graduated from.
Yeah.
I feel like you could almost walk it completely without going to a liberal arts school at all.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
I feel there isn't so much of a stigma anymore to get a degree. A lot of studios and a lot of companies, you can check that you have a degree, but that's not really what's important. It's, have you shipped something, or have you worked on a project, or what's your portfolio like, or more importantly, like if you've worked on something else, how your previous supervisors or employers view you as an employee. A lot of those things are just so much more important. So you could probably learn 90% of what you need to know outside of even going into the classroom. But I think that 10% that the classroom kind of gives you is also very important when it comes to people skills, working in teams. As you get kind of further in the industry, it's almost more people skills as well as artistic skills, especially as deadlines get closer and things turn into a kind of a pressure cooker. Yeah. But in terms of artistic skill, you can definitely really develop your portfolio online.
After graduating university, did you initially move where you thought jobs might be, or did you look for work closest to you? How did that work for you?
Yeah, mine was a bit strange because I fortunately had the opportunity through university to network a lot. And I had become really good friends with Jalil Sadul at Steamroller Studios. He allowed me to kind of intern at his studio down in Florida, kind of the minute I had left school.
Wow.
And it was a really fortunate opportunity, one that I'm constantly thankful for, because it was, my first real job in the industry. And from there, it allowed me to kind of understand like working in a team. And it was a smaller studio at the time, and just like working with a close-knit group of people, and it's something that definitely was invaluable for someone coming right out of the gates.
Yeah.
And then from there, I moved back to my hometown in Portland, Oregon, where in terms of the actual environment, there wasn't actually a lot of work opportunity. Like Leica was taking a lot of experienced people, and I wasn't quite there yet. And there was a few ad firms. So I actually started at an ad firm for a bit before going up to Vancouver to start in the VFX industry. Definitely, I think you can find opportunity kind of in whichever city you start at, if it's a larger city, because there's plenty of, I think ad firms are a great way to start. Video game companies are another great way to start. I think it's easy to fixate on a large studio. Like you come out of school and you're like, I really want to work at Disney. Like, and we all do. We all want to work there. But it's like one of those things where it's just like, it's so hard to do it, even though right when you're coming out of school, because there are people that have been in the industry for years and they're still trying to get into Disney.
Oh God, yeah. I know I am.
Yeah, me too.
That initial connection through your friend at Steamroller Studios, how did you make that? Did you study together or meet on the internet?
Jalil was actually an alumni at my university. We actually, during one of our university trips out to California to kind of a conference, we had met just through meeting the alumni of the university. And that was kind of our first contact. And then I had fostered that relationship through email since then. So I feel like starting out as a prospective student, it's definitely important to be always reaching out and connecting, especially with alumni or people that are around you that have experience. Because, I mean, even though you're not specifically mining for a job or anything, just talking to them, getting their experience, getting their perspective, it's very important, especially when you can hear a lot of news from them about where jobs might be going next, or where maybe things aren't best when you might have thought they were. It's great to hear a lot of different opinions on that, especially if their personal tastes align with yours a bit. It allows you to kind of guide your path a bit more as well. So it's very important to reach out to alumni and other connections.
What compelled you to pursue art or a creative career, and what sort of authority, pushback, or affirmation did you receive? And how could you best deal with that? When
I actually was going through high school, I was going to be a doctor. The kind of the social pressures and me as a doctor, it's hard to imagine. But growing up in the environment I it was very high pressure. It was like you were either a doctor or an engineer, or you were nothing. And it was a really interesting school because of that, because it did put a lot of people together and kind of force us to be something maybe we didn't want to be. What kind of made me change it was my parents were very supportive of the arts, but they were also sharing that same sentiment of a bit worried that I might not actually be able to survive after I left art school. So they kind of, and it's a totally fair and reasonable thing, considering, the way, economic environments are. During that time, they were very fortunate enough to say, okay, you can definitely pursue art and filmmaking, because I'd seen one Pixar movie, and that was kind of like, it changed my whole rationale of thinking. And I was like, I should probably go into this movie industry a bit.
Yeah.
And during that time, it just kind of allowed me to work through that. So I had probably around my junior year is when I shifted gears, and I decided that film was where I wanted to be. I kind of was looking at art schools, like primarily art schools without liberal arts degrees. And I think my parents were a bit cautious about that, because they were worried that I wouldn't be walking out with a real degree in a way. I can understand how they would feel about that. So they wanted me to take a bit more like of a rounded approach. So we made a compromise, and that was the compromise of going to a liberal arts school where I could get other classes and other education on top of just an art-focused degree. It did kind of remove you from being able to just focus entirely on art, which does have its benefits.
If you don't mind, what was the Pixar movie that sort of sparked your love of animation?
It was Up.
Yeah,
I think it was actually in that first 5 minutes that I realized that, okay, I had been definitely touched by a Pixar film before, but that was the moment where I realized that I would love to be a part of that process.
Do you feel like you're able to get that creative expression out at the office?
A lot of it comes with what particular client you might be working for.
That's fair.
In the past, some of the past clients that I had been working for, I felt like I was executing a very specific thing. Like I was dropping a character in an environment, and they wanted this tree here and this rock here, and that was it. And they were very specific about it, to the point where, it becomes a bit more difficult. But there are moments where I do feel like I get a lot of creative freedom, where I'm setting up a large environment, and maybe the client doesn't quite know what the rest of the environment will look like. They just have one idea. They're like, I would like this one thing right here. And that's kind of really all we want in the framing and the composition of that. But everything else is still up in the air. Like we have an art Bible and an idea, but not really a way to get there. And charting that particular journey of building an environment and kind of figuring out what we could put around it that would work with the world is very exciting to me. Like I do enjoy it. Once that's kind of been bought off on and stamped, a lot of it is kind of just working from that. It definitely comes and goes, I think, with anything.
Oh, for sure. We get the same thing in matte painting. Early in the project, it's very slow, but it's a bit more creative. Late in the project, it's very fast paced. It's not very creative. Problem solving creativity, a lot of it. How do you keep from burning out on like an artistic level?
That's a tough one, because I feel like it changes per project. I would say that something I always try to do is, especially when large environment, like a master shot's established, and I kind of figure out what it needs to be done, and then it's just kind of moving from there. I'm always trying to kind of keep working on something else as well. I'm fortunate enough where I'm working on one sequence, but I do have the ability to kind of keep another thing open, kind of in the back pocket. And this could be something where you talk to your lead, or you talk to your supervisor, and you get something that's a bit lower priority that maybe isn't due for like a few months. And even during the high pressure situations, you can kind of pick away at it. And that just allows you to kind of not get caught in that moment where you're just kind of opening a Maya or opening up a nuke, and you're just looking at everything, checking it off, hitting render, and like kicking it downstream. It makes it a bit more refreshing to just be able to look at something else for 5 minutes and then, go from there and come back to what you're doing.
A lot of students, they don't seem to be innately aware that they're probably going to have to move, and potentially relatively often for the rest of their time in the industry. Is that something you knew when you decided you wanted to be in VFX or animation?
It was something I had felt like I had known, but to be honest, I wasn't expecting it to this degree. And a lot of this is my own doing as well. Like I could have chosen to stay in one state or one country for a while, and then my choice to come out to Weta, for example, was my own doing. So I brought that one on myself. But it's definitely something you have to expect. You have to move, and you have to move often. Makes it interesting, because you do get an interesting perspective when you come into a studio and you see people that have been there a while, that have been there for 10 or 15 years, and they have families and they have houses. And things are very established for them. And then there's almost like this second or third generation of people as well that, you come in and you might not have been there long, maybe like a year or 2 years or 4 months or 6 months.
Yeah.
And that might be how long you have a contract for. And then you need to expect to find a new studio, or maybe find a new studio in the same country or the same state. It allows you to kind of think ahead, like if you value stability, or you value the thought of having a home and a life and a family, not life, but like more of a domestic life,
conventional life.
Yeah, you kind of want to look more to a place where there are a lot of studios around you, and that's why like places like Montreal or Vancouver or LA kind of not so much anymore.
Yeah,
it used to be, but Vancouver and Montreal especially are places where a lot of studios are at the moment, and you want to kind of plan your life around that. So if you get a contract in at one of those studios, you can kind of hopscotch around them. Even then, that's still very brittle.
Yes.
Like a lot of where studios are and where they go, it can change very quickly, and that really depends on larger government, economic policies as well, which is always interesting.
There is that generation of people who have been with a studio for many, many years. It's always people of a very certain age range, right? Mids and juniors, you have no hope. You're going to be contract to contract constantly.
And I think studios, they don't want to get rid of you, like especially if you're good. And that's kind of the other thing that I had to learn myself personally. When a studio ends your contract, it might not be because you're bad or they think you're terrible. It's because they can't afford to have anyone else there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of this nothing personal lifestyle, which is very personal also, because it's your life, something where it's like, okay, well, my contract ended here and I need to physically leave this country because I can no longer stay there because of a work permit. And it's hard not to take that personally. It seems like it's this like interesting like demographic like split between people. And I kind of see like everyone kind of hits that wall after a while. Like they can't be a lead, or they can't be, an HOD, because there are only so many of them at a studio.
Yeah.
So eventually it just gets to the point where it's like, I want to do my own thing, or I'll try and go to another studio and be a supervisor. And
the production houses kind of have their foot on the throat. Like VFX studios operate generally at a 5% profit margin, which is hilariously low. How do we do it, Matt? How do we fix the VFX industry?
Oh man,
save us.
I got to get a whiteboard and like all kinds of string. For VFX studios to be profitable, there has to be more accountability on the higher production and on the film side. There just isn't. Even with higher budget clients, there's still not a lot of knowledge about time and money and effort and changes. And not a lot of studios bill for changes either, which is another damaging thing. The whole bidding process in general, which is another broken concept. A lot of the times we would be sitting in a studio and we'd be kind of like, oh, this project might be coming down the corner. We're like, oh, sweet, this sounds fun. And then a week later, we get an email going around saying that another studio had underbid, another studio I was at, because all of a sudden we don't have the project. It just reflects how volatile everything is. The way movie companies treat their VFX houses and their vendors, it's all very, very different. And it's all case by case. I've had projects in the past where everyone around me, like the core team of people, like all the way up to our side supervisors, were great. It was just an amazing time and a positive experience. But our client was a bit tougher than that.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it was just like we were always trying to be optimistic towards presenting our best work. And you can have things where your production side, your studio side is fantastic.
The most popular video on our channel for some reason is the Cinema Cemetery episode entitled "You Don't Want to Work in VFX." And the only reason I made it was because, to me, it's obvious why you would want to work in VFX. Like, you watch the making of or the commentary on any movie and you're sold. Like, it's like, oh, okay, this is what I'll do. But I think there are so many issues in the industry that make it particularly challenging, especially if you're not expecting it. What to you is the most enjoyable thing about being an artist in VFX? Like, what do you love about your job?
I think getting a challenge, and there are challenges every day when it comes to just how are we going to build this, or how are we going to put this together? Being able to solve that problem and, having it work and presenting it to go downstream and then seeing it come to fruition is probably the best part.
How's New Zealand?
I actually really love it here. It's really interesting, especially the whole kind of Weta campus atmosphere, because it's it's basically this large conglomerate of everyone from all over the world. Not only are there like local New Zealanders and Australians here, but pretty much everybody from every walk of life, is down here, which is actually really incredible. Most of us, our families are in the countries that we had left them in. So we need to kind of all be together and make the best of it.
Yeah.
And so there's that camaraderie that kind of makes it special.
If you could talk to the younger version of yourself, still in school, still studying, what would be the advice that you would give to you?
I have so many things. I have so many things. I felt like I was very concerned about a lot of things that didn't actually matter, obviously personal and art related, but I was fixated on a lot of things, and I would get stressed and I would worry grades in classes. I was so fixated on doing well in a class. If I could kind of go back and tell myself that maybe focusing on the grades and focusing on what about it you can take away from the grades is more important than the grade itself. When I keep working, like it's definitely one of those things where it's a process of failure, but a good process of failure. Like, I feel like you have to keep messing up. And I think the most important thing is to just not give up when you fail. I have a lot of friends that graduated with me that they have to keep trying. And I feel like if you just kind of accept where you're at, it doesn't help you. You just have to keep pushing forward, in whatever aspect in life. And that's definitely the most important part.
Thanks so much, dude. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching that video. If you liked what you saw, give us a like. If you didn't, don't.